Welcome back to Supercar Secrets, brought to you by supercarsmonaco.com. Just before lockdown, I got together with our resident classic and supercar expert, Iain Tyrrell, to pick his brains on more than 30 years of experience. I asked him what was the most significant car that he'd ever actually done a search for, and he came back with the Lamborghini Miura used in the Italian job. Let's find out the story of how he got involved with this iconic car.
So, how did you first get involved in that whole story?
Oh gosh, well, as a 12-year-old boy, I heard of my first Lamborghini V12, and that had an indelible imprint on my memory, really. And from there, I started off as a Rolls-Royce and Bentley mechanic when I was 19. I got recruited into one of their service centres, which was wonderful. At the age of 21, I started my own business doing high performance and special cars. And that same Lamborghini I'd heard at the age of 12 came in for work. Wow. And one thing led to another. I started specialising in working on Lamborghinis. That was in 1984. And in 2012, I just got one of those amazing phone calls out of the blue from a contact of mine. Of course, over the years, I've built up some contacts. And he rang me and we were chatting away about various cars. And he said, "You haven't any interest in the Miura from the Italian job, have you?" And I was like, "What?" You
Is the Pope a Catholic?
Yeah, exactly. So one thing led to another. I was skeptical because, of course, I'd seen the movie as a kid, being of a certain age. And it had a really fantastic, it left a real imprint on me. And I never thought, the car had just been sort of always beyond reach. It never even was in my consciousness to find it. And here I was being supposedly offered the car. So I put together some funding with a contact of mine who had just sold his business for a lot of money. And I went off to a secret underground car park in Paris and basically had about 2 hours, because I was in a queue of people interested, to make the decision whether to purchase or not.
So you had to try and establish its authenticity in that small
space
window?
of time.
Wow.
But I knew really, dare I say it, I'm sufficiently cognizant with them, that I knew details of the trim, the specification of the car, the number that were made in orange that year, etc. I was able to drill down fairly quickly to ascertain that it was the car.
Right, and what sort of state was it in when you found it?
It was in fantastic condition. It had had very few owners, none of whom knew what the car was. And the car had only done 18,000 kilometres from new, 12,000 miles. And it had been in some very important private collections. One of them I can name because it was in the public domain, Norberto Ferretti, who owns Riva speedboats and Ferretti super yachts. He had the car for a number of years, but I repeat, it was even for sale by a dealer in Switzerland, and they didn't know it was the car from the movie. They hadn't joined the dots and hadn't done the research.
Good heavens. So I guess you were effectively one of the few people in the world that would know that car was genuine, and you were able to presumably then secure it from the vendor.
Ostensibly, yes.
Yeah, wow. And so where is that car now?
Well, I did a round of projects with the car. The car was secured in 2012. I took it back to the Great St Bernard Pass where the original movie scene was shot. I've recreated a lot of footage around that. I was very fortunate also. Lamborghini organised the 50th anniversary of the Miura launch in 2016, and there were 23 Miuras that were flown in from around the world, Japan, the US, especially for that event by their owners. And I was one of those 23 cars, and that was a momentous occasion, driving through northern Italy in that car. And then we sold the car to a gentleman in Liechtenstein in 2018, actually.
But I think you've also gone on to shoot some really interesting footage with some of the key people involved in, well, that car and the whole of that model range in the history of the Miura.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to meet a sort of automotive legend, really, one of the 20th century's most prolific car designers, Marcello Gandini. He's designed most of the Lamborghinis, I would say, as well as countless other cars. And he very kindly invited me to his private mansion. He's got an old monastery set on a plateau outside Turin overlooking Mont Blanc. Doesn't get much better than that, really.
Fantastic.
And I drove the car to his house and was able to interview him.
Great stuff. And I think you also met the legendary designer and racing car manufacturer, Gianpaolo Dallara.
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
And he himself, I think, now owns a Miura?
Yes, he does. I mean, he and I have been friends for some years. He was the chief engineer at Lamborghini in the 1960s and early 70s, so he developed all those way out mechanical things that really shouldn't work, such as the Miura, but they do. And I took the car to his factory and he explained to me firsthand how he designed the chassis, which was fantastic. Wow. You can't buy that.
So what are we talking about in terms of a price range these days for the Miura model? So I guess the one you're talking about must be one of the more sought after ones, but what do you have to pay for a good Miura today?
They have a sort of pecking order in terms of models, as all these cars often do. They start in price. You won't find a decent car now for under 750, 800,000 pounds sterling. That's sort of your entry into the Miura club, really. Unless you're fortunate enough to come across one that's in bits in a garage somewhere, which could be bought for less, but that's extremely unlikely these days. And they go up to the millions, they really do.
Okay, and are there many out there that are kind of potential barn finds, would you say? Are there many unknown cars or lost cars?
Well, we keep thinking the answer to that is no, and then all of a sudden we get confounded because another one or two just appear from nowhere.
Right, okay.
I mean, give you an example, there was one buried in a French chap's garden a couple of years ago. Literally, he dug a great big hole in the ground and buried a Miura in it and covered it over again. And it was only when he died and his assets were seized by the French government because he died intestate, no relatives, that they sort of found this car with a metal detector under the ground.
Well, I think that must be one of the saddest tax avoidance schemes I've ever heard of.
Talk about burying your assets.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's a fascinating story. So for now, Iain Tyrrell, thank you very much.
Pleasure.